All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 27th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda with the removal of item 6C. Second.
It has been moved to approve the agenda with removal of item 6C by Hansen, seconded by Lankaitis. All those for any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And we will now read our purpose statement, and we would invite anyone in the room to join in with us as soon as it is on the screen here. The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential. Thank you. And we'll begin this evening with our discussion items, starting with our board committee updates. And first will be the facilities committee.
I actually was not at the meeting, but the minutes, believe cover everything that we discussed. And if anybody has any questions, maybe the other two members would be willing to answer if there's any questions.
Any questions or comments for facilities? Okay, moving on to policy. And Director Winfrey was not able to be here at the last minute, but we have all of the policies that we discussed are up for discussion in our next discussion item. Teaching and learning.
The Teaching and Learning Committee met on March 20th, and we finalized the policy for instructional material selection and have sent it forward to the policy committee. And then we reviewed the Ames Middle School snapshot information in our meeting.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for teaching and learning? Okay, we will move on to our policies for discussion. And since Director Winfrey is not here, those are all listed out. The ones that we discussed are in the minutes here. Did anybody have, questions or comments on the policies for discussion? Okay. We will move on then to our teaching and learning update, beginning with ruler implementation, and I'll turn it over to Director Miller.
Well, good evening. Thanks for having me here this evening. I'm excited to share with you this evening a little bit more about Ruler, which, as you know, is the social emotional learning curriculum that we have adopted and are in the beginning stages of implementation with. So I'll give you a little bit of background just to refresh you on what Ruler is, why it's important, and where we are in our plan. Okay, so hold on just a moment. Let me get back to the beginning. Here we are. Okay, so we want to start by talking about something that we don't talk about all the time, I think, and maybe in our adult world, and that's emotions. So the premise behind Ruler is that emotions matter greatly and they influence every aspect of our lives. And some of you maybe had an experience where you had a really strong emotional reaction to something and it was hard to move past, right? And it kind of colored maybe the rest of your day. Maybe it's something that you had to work on, maybe something that you had a different kind of family experience. But the things listed there are some things identified by Ruler that really come into play when you have strong emotions, right? And having strong emotions is not a bad thing. Figuring out how you want to work through those emotions and how you want to show up with those emotions and how you want to channel them really is the heart and soul of the Ruler work. And one of the things that Ruler really practices or preaches, I guess, through its materials is that learning really is social emotional. if you if you're not sure or you're not in tune with your emotional state, that can color everything else. So it's really critical to be able to label your emotions and understand them and figure out how you want to express them in order to get the full benefit of the learning opportunities in school. So you may have had a similar thing happen to you that happened at my house this morning. My daughter came in this morning as we were getting ready and said, Mom, there's a big test today at school. And I was like, really? Tell me more about that. She said, it's going to determine a lot. I know it's really important. I got to do really well. It's like a big state test. And our emotions were really high, right? And so if we hadn't been able to talk through, kind of label those emotions, figure out some strategies for regulating, that could have colored and maybe still did color how she engaged and how she showed up to school that day, today, and how we went through the test, right? And as you know, the test is ISASS, which is kind of a big deal. And I do try not to wear my director of teaching learning hat at home. So all the time. So I let her kind of tell me about it and how she was feeling. But we have lots of students and as we have been going through this year, I've recognized as an adult, I don't always have the tools that maybe I would like to have. So I'm still developing my own tools on how am I showing up? How am I handling my emotions? How am I working through them? How am I showing up for other people on my team? And those same skills are the skills that we really want our students to have so that we can make sure that they're getting the full benefit of their education. So when I talk about ruler, it's important to remember that it's an acronym, right? So these are the skills when people say, well, what's ruler's goal? What are we trying to develop? These are the skills we're trying to develop. So we're trying to figure out how to recognize emotion. One of the games we play, and we played it with adults, is a charades game where you get an emotion card and then you have to make the face and people have to guess what the emotion is. There's some big ones that are pretty easy, happy to, sad, that kind of thing. But when you try to get into the nuance of labeling emotions, it's really difficult. And even though I know some of the folks that I've played this game with really well, we don't get each other's emotions right? It's a really nuanced task to do, but important if we're going to figure out how we can help each other as we recognize and then moving into understanding the emotions. So what are the causes and consequences? So I was talking with my daughter, I was telling you that story. I was talking this morning with her. She said she felt really stressed about this test. And I said, okay, so when you're stressed, you have a big thing and you don't have the resources you need to be able to accomplish it. So that's what it means to be stressed. When you're feeling pressured, you have a big thing, it's important, you have the resources, but you're just feeling a lot of pressure because it's a big thing and you don't want to mess it up. Which one of those things is where you are? And so because she was like, well, I do have some, skills, maybe I'm feeling pressure and not stress. And so then we're able to talk about, once we got that label on it, how do we want to express and regulate that pressure, which is different than if she'd said, I don't have the resources to do this, right? So that's a different kind of thing. Still important to process through, but to get out of the place we were at this morning where we were kind of stuck, you had to get all the way through all of the skills, right? And when you break them down kind of in this acronym, I think it really helps us to figure out why social emotional learning is so important in order to be able to engage in those ways. So why ruler specifically? So ruler, when we went through the curriculum review a few years ago, so this was before I was able to be a part of the team, but they really talked about these benefits that they've done research on ruler and in schools where it's implemented, and they find these positive results and then a decrease in the results listed there, which I think we can all agree are things that we really want to see in our own data, right? So I think this is a good tie-in for us. So where are we in our implementation process? The 2020-2021 school years where we had the team that engaged in the research and recommended ruler and you approved it. And then last year, there were building leadership teams that started to engage in some of the adult learning, and we created our implementation plan. And this year, one of the things that I think is both really awesome about ruler, but also frustrating for folks, is they really do emphasize that adults need to be able to do those skills in ruler before we teach them to the students. So we've had a full year of staff learning this year before we start rolling out anything to students, which is frustrating because when you're learning about it, you just want to be able to tell everybody about it, right? Like if you find this really powerful, it's hard to say, whoa, let's slow down and wait a little bit. So we're excited though that we're going to start working with students. So the Ruler core team are teachers who have really invested in helping to learn more about Ruler and then helping to design and deliver the professional development that's happening in the buildings this year. So they're joining us in hosting a Ruler family night so that our community can learn more about what are the skills of Ruler and what's our plan to implement it. It's going to be Tuesday, April 4th at the High School Performing Arts Center. We'll have an overview, big picture about what Ruler is, and then you'll be able to go to a breakout based on which band you have students. I know several people have students in more than one band, so you might have to pick or go to one for a little bit and go to another one. The resources will be online so you can see one that you missed, but it'll address specifically what's going to be taught in those grade bands next year. We also, like I said, have that core team are doing some lessons this spring. So families received a letter if your child is in one of those classrooms where the lessons are going to be launched. But they're really going to focus on the tools of Ruler. So when I was talking about those skills, Ruler has developed some tools to help us implement those. One of them is the charter. So the classroom comes together or the school, right? So when we did it with staff, school staff came together and said, how do we want to feel at work? And then concretely, what would we have to do in order to be able to feel that way? So we call that a charter. So the students this spring will likely have the experience of making a charter with their class. We will also use a mood meter. So that helps you with the naming of the emotions. So it kind of looks like a quadrant and you say, where's my energy level? Is it high? Is it low? Where's my pleasantness? Am I high or low? And then you can kind of plot and it will give you some suggested words because a lot of us, if you can think about how many different emotions you can name, I was shocked at how few I could name the first time I did that exercise. So it's helpful to have a bank of like, oh, that's what I'm feeling. That's kind of useful. So I like that. A meta moment is asking us to think about how would my best self respond in this situation? Because sometimes that's really hard to do in the heat of an intense emotion, right? So trying to find that pausing point or reflection after or pre-planning, right? I know I have this going on. How would my best self respond in this and kind of mapping that out? And then the last thing is a blueprint where you have maybe a conflict has happened, or maybe you're thinking, gosh, I'm going to go into this and I'm nervous about it. So it's kind of perspective taking. How do I feel? How somebody else might feel, right? And then we kind of do that preparing to have that. It's almost like a restorative conversation. They call it a blueprint conversation to be able to hear how this, whatever it was affected you and affected me, and how can we make a plan to move forward together. So that's really about the blueprint. So those would be the 4 tools that we focus on most this spring as we go through the lessons. That's where we are in the Ruler the Ruler implementation plan. So if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have a quick question. So, there might be children who have difficulty recognizing emotions.
Yes.
And you said the first thing was cues on emotions. So how do you work with those children?
That's a great question. So starting with preschool, so the ideal is, right, we have students come into us at preschool and all the elementary lessons, as you get into the tools, there's a whole lesson on one emotion word. So I kind of talked with you about the difference between pressure and stress, but they go through that level of here's some things, here's what we might see, here's how we might recognize it showing up, we might use it. A lot of Ruler suggestions are if you're using a particular text or book or story with your class anyway, let's talk about where might that character fall on the mood meter? So kind of trying to tie those things to just gradually scaffold and help students learn to do that through a variety of ways. I don't know if that answered your question.
No,
but there's specific lessons.
It did. I guess that part of that might involve some frustration on a student's part if they're having difficulty. So
Yes.
How do you work with the students who are feeling frustrated, they're not successful at what this is?
I think that teachers will really do a great job supporting individual students. So I think it'll come down to differentiation. And I think Ruler has some in the dashboard there. So there's like a bank of different kinds of resources. So I haven't dug in specifically to see if I know I've seen some about differentiating different options for students. And I think one of the other core beliefs of Ruler is that you have to engage in Ruler with families. So it has to be a partnership with the student and the teacher and the family together. And so I think that team would be able to also help figure out what does this particular student need to be able to be successful in this.
I'm not sure quite how to ask this question, but it seems like the legislature this year has had some problems thinking through how they understand and label and express their response to SEL. If they determine that teaching students how to manage their emotions and behavior was not acceptable, what type of backup plan do we have? Like, do we know how potential legal laws coming through might impact this, or what we do instead?
Yeah, I don't know if like we will follow the law. So if there's a law that says that we can't teach Ruler, then we will have to pull back from teaching Ruler. To the best of my knowledge right now, there's not a law that says that.
Okay, thank you, Director Miller.
Yes, you're welcome.
All right, we will move on to our 2023-2024 funding update, and we'll turn it over to Chris Stendland.
Good evening, Board. I wanted just to do a very brief update on where we are on budget. There's been a lot of significant bills that have gone through the legislature this year regarding K-12 in general and school finance. Some of them are still pending. We'll know more after this week when the second funnel passes. But one of the things that did happen was that there was an error in the residential rollback that had been in the calculation by the Department of Revenue and Finance when they calculated that due to the they combined regular residential with multifamily residential into one category, and the rollback wasn't calculated right. So they passed legislation to have that recalculated. That gave the county auditors until March 8th to get those revaluations done. And they backed local budget certification up until April 30th, which happens to be a Sunday. So it actually is May 1st. So we're doing things kind of a little bit later this year. We'll do the big budget presentation. I'm sorry, I feel like I've got my back to you on this first meeting in April, and then we'll adopt on the 24th. But I just wanted to kind of show you what, in the midst of the educational savings accounts and all the other things that they've been passing, they did set state supplemental aid at 3%. And I think a lot of people believe that automatically means school districts are going to get a 3% increase in their funding. And there's been, I think, some misunderstanding on that. So I just wanted to briefly go over where that puts us, where I believe our tax rate is at this point. And then it will also incorporate the pre-levy bond referendum that or resolution that you're going to pass later in the meeting. I hope you're going to pass later in the meeting. So I just wanted to remind you where we were when we had our certified enrollment in the fall. We were down almost 91 students in our resident students. We had 46 students that we counted that were resident students, but will be attending school elsewhere, which brought our count down that we get funding for to 45, just under 45 students. When you take in the fact that we will not be able to retain the funding for those 46 students that are attending elsewhere, we'll have to write checks to other districts. And that we had 6.6 less students open enroll into us. Our total served population went down just 98 students. That's that second line from the bottom. So that kind of, as far as our funding is based on for 23-24, we're down the equivalent of 98 students. We can go back to the first page now, Dan. So what does 3% mean to us? Well, 3% is the increase to the district cost per student, which is $222. So our cost per student did go from $74.68 to $76.90. And you can see what that generates in each of those years. We did have an enrollment adjustment that we overcounted 3 students in the fall of 20. Now, that isn't a mistake that we made. That was a mistake other school districts made when they identified students open enrolled to them to the wrong district. So I want to make sure that you understand that wasn't something that happened in our registrar's office. So when the students that are open enrolled to a district, the district puts them into the certified enrollment and it flows over and it goes on to that resident district count. So our new funding is $628,621. And for us, that's a 1.88% increase on who we counted, not what we get to keep, but on who we counted. When we take in what we have to send other school districts for those 46 students, plus what we will not be getting from the other districts sending money to us, we have to subtract out $394,000. That leaves us with net new funding of $234,000, or a 0.7% increase. So 3% for Ames is not 3% for us. It's 0.7. The reason it's below 1% is there's no budget guarantee on the open enrollment piece. So, and if we could go to the third piece, Dan. We are at our max on cash reserve, so we will not be levying cash reserve this year. So that is reducing our tax askings by $1.5 million. That will cause our general fund tax rate to decrease by 37 cents. That change in the residential rollback actually caused a decrease in our valuation from the prior year. So we will get just under 78,000 less for PEPL next year. And to stay at the $4.05 for debt service, we'll be reducing that tax levy by 185,000. So at this point, now they're still kind of making adjustments to the budget file. I gave these documents to JD on Wednesday. He got them posted. I went in Thursday to check everything, and they'd made an adjustment to the instructional support levy, which changed my tax rates just slightly. So I had to reprint everything and get them to him. But this is where I believe we're going to end up. It might shift like within that 5 decimal points, but it's not going to shift significantly anywhere. So it might be 34,960 or 34,950, but it'll be right in there. If you're concerned about the cash reserve, the one nice thing about doing the pre-levy on the debt service is that we can control that, how much we pre-levy each year. So as we start to dip on those cash reserves back down below that 25%, we can levy that cash reserve and pre-levy less on the debt service, and just bounce that tax rate down below that 405. So we'll be able to manage that and not have any issues with our financial stability. And that's really all I had for tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So big picture would be, we are financially stable, continue to be financially stable. We have held up our agreement that we would build a new high school and our tax rate would not go up. But when it comes to setting our funding for next year, that is where people need to understand there will not be money on trees here.
Now, as you said, we're financially stable. We have quite a bit of cash because we've been levying the cash reserve to keep that tax rate the same. Spending authority is always the issue for us. So we actually have cash that we cannot spend because we don't have as much unspent spending authority. So when we have to make budget cuts to stay with that ongoing funding, I should say ongoing spending authority, because that's really what the concern is for us. And that's the intent of the formula. It's the intent to, whether we like it or not, because we're a property rich district, but it's intended to level the playing field between property rich and property poor districts, and that you cannot just levy cash and provide a better education for the students because they live in our community versus one that's 10 miles away.
Any other questions or comments for Chris?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That's my agenda here. All right, and next we have the naming the Ames High Auditorium. And for this one, I will turn it over. Is it Dr. Lawson or is it? Okay, all right, turn over to you, Dr. Lawson.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Approximately 8 months ago, the superintendent's office received a petition to name the new Ames High Auditorium in honor of the late Wayne Hank Hansen. Since the submission of the petition, we've heard numerous accounts of the work and impact of Mr. Hansen from students and fellow staff, both near and far. Pursuant to board policy 801.5.E, I recommend the board name the Performing Arts Center at Ames High School for Wayne Hank Hansen. Hansen, a beloved teacher at Ames High for over 3 decades, taught classes in English, speech, and drama while developing and overseeing the theater arts program. He leaves an outstanding legacy of former students who not only remember him fondly, but also carry what they learned from him in their daily lives, as many went on to be teachers, artists, and theater professionals. Several of his former students count Hansen as their biggest inspiration. The breadth and depth of the production staged under Hansen's direction during a school year is exemplary for a high school theater program. He delivered over 120 productions in his tenure, as well as countless summer theater opportunities. Students stretched their minds and capabilities by putting on works such as Antigone, Julius Caesar, and Midsummer Night's Dream, just to name a few. It is the hope of his nominators that his passion for the theater, and most of all for the students he guided and influenced with so much care within that space, continue on through this commemoration. Finally, I would like to thank Communications Director Amy DeLashman. Thank you, Amy. And the Ames Community School District Facility Naming Advisory Committee for their hard work and commitment to this process. Thanks all.
I have one question that came up on a letter that was forwarded to us today. Is it the Ames High Auditorium or is it the Ames High Performing Arts Center?
It's a good question. That's a great question. That's a great question. So I'll follow up with Jerry to find out what the official name is, because we've come across that a few times. And so let me find out what the official name is currently.
Because I think the first time that I recall someone making a distinction in it was in the letter that we received today that I thought was, to be transparent, we received a letter asking us to consider naming it a performing arts center to be as holistic as possible in describing what that space will mean to this community and the opportunities that will be provided in that space. I think that's a great description of that. I just wondered, because that was the first time reading that came to my mind.
Have you allowed to ask questions? No, I'm sorry.
So first, a technical question. The discussion is about the naming of the Ames High Auditorium, but we have the supporting link with the recommended policy and kind of the administrative rules. I'm supportive of the naming of the Ames High Auditorium, as you said, but I had some questions about the administrative rules and how we go forward. Is this a correct time to talk about that? Or will that come back through policy committee later?
I was under the impression that the administrative rules would come back through the policy committee later.
And to be
Okay.
fair, policy committee doesn't review their administrative rules, just the policy.
Yeah.
But the policy will come back through policy committee.
Okay, so we'll have time to talk about that part of it later, because I would like to address how do we think about this going forward for lots of teachers we have in the building.
Sure.
Because we don't have enough places in every building to name after every teacher. That's great. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely. So let me just make a note. So your question was around the administrative rules or the actual?
I can follow up with you separately through email.
Sure.
Can I just clarify a procedure in part for us and in part for everybody who's watching? We are, as a board, not going to vote on this, right, at this point?
Not today.
But there will be a full board vote?
Yes, it will come back as an action item.
Okay,
Yes, at the next meeting.
all right. I thought that it was, once it went to Julius and it was, okay.
Our policy states that it is an action item that comes on a board of agenda for us to make the final decision.
Well, it's exciting to have this come to fruition. And I also want to join you in thanking Director DeLashmutt and all of the community members and staff who participated on the naming committee. We really appreciate your time, and it's exciting to have this appear on the agenda now. Are there other comments or questions? Okay. So then, yeah, thank you for your clarifying question, Amy, Erica, because yes, so this will come back to the board at a future meeting, probably at the next meeting as an action item. Okay. And we did not have anyone sign up to speak under our discussion items. So I will go ahead and move on to our public forum, and we'll read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And we will begin with Judy Brown.
Good evening, Judy Brown, 5423 Tennessee Street. I want to thank you, Dr. Lawson, for your information. I don't know if what I'm going to be talking about is redundant, but it's been asked that we do this. So I am reading part 1 of Wayne Hansens' bio. Wayne Hansen was born and raised in Manila, Iowa. High school friends described him as a tall, well-mannered, and a good egg who joined in everything. He was in every play there was in high school and also loved music and band. After graduation, he attended UNI, where he was also in many plays. He once told friends that going to college opened the eyes to the world. UNI classmate Delbert Carpenter said, "I remember Wayne as a good actor and a friendly person with a cheerful attitude and a broad smile." Wayne played the title role in Macbeth. He had to be good or Stan Wood, the longtime theater director, would not have cast him. Wayne was becoming the star. Wayne was one of 2 students to receive the prestigious Bertha Martin Scholarship Award his senior year. UNI roommate Tom Apis said Wayne Hansen was one of the most remarkable theater champions. It was in his heart and soul. He realized the performing arts were essential to our way of life. He saw theater as a builder of greatness in all of us. He shows us who we are and who we can become. Wayne touched everyone with a dynamic spirit. After college, Mr. Hansen taught at Hampton High School for 5 years. Hampton alumni J.K. Ross said, "I learned about respect for the art and appropriate behavior in the theater. I learned about history and traditions and to love rehearsals even more than the performances. His powerful influence set me on a path for the rest of my life as an actor, a director, a producer, a teacher, and for that I'm eternally grateful." Hampton alumni William Botke said, "We were so lucky to have been given his talents. Although we were a small town school, he brought spectacular plays and musicals to our stage. What he accomplished with sets and costumes with what I assume was a shoestring budget was truly impressive. What a legacy for an individual to be remembered so fondly by so many for so many years. Truly a testament to his life, a dedication to his students." Hampton alum Gary Van Wert said, "Little did we know that he would be a source of example and challenge that would shape his students to become more than what we were when we first entered his classroom. The thing that was different in Mr. Hansen's classroom was the example he set as a young, bright, rising star in education. Because of his mentoring, I came out of my introverted farm kid self to participate in the world of stage and speech competition that continued to shape my life today." And part 2 is coming.
Thank you, Judy. Victoria Van Forest.
I'm Victoria Van Boris, 110 East Street, and I am part 2. When Ames High administrators Ralph Farrar and William Rip recruited Wayne Hansen to join the faculty as teacher and director in 1970, Hampton students were very unhappy, feeling that he had been, quote, stolen away from them, end quote. But Dr. Farrar and Mr. Rip knew Wayne could develop a strong drama department and establish a standard of excellence. He upheld the high quality of the Ames High staff, teaching discipline and hard work, creating a space for all, and giving students educational equity and improvement. Mr. Hansen taught speech, English, and theater arts and directed 3 to 4 shows per year at Ames High for 33 years. He also directed theater arts class productions, oversaw the annual senior directed 1X, and directed 27 5-week summer theater sessions when 4 more plays were presented to the public each summer. During evening rehearsals and Saturdays with drama students, he was a mentor and taught life skills. He gave his summers to further expand his students' learning experience. Dozens of Ames alumni and former faculty members have also written tributes to him. Ames alum John Kupcher said, quote, "He inspired me to greater heights than I knew I had. He helped hone my self-confidence, professionalism, and duty to those I work with. He also conveyed a confidence that infected me and the other cast and crew. I don't remember any discussions of can we accomplish this, but rather what comes next," end quote. Ames alum and New York Times best-selling author Neil Stevenson said, quote, "Hank was one of the 2 best teachers I ever had. Being Hank's student and working on AHS theater was one of the most intense and intensely educational experiences I have had in my life. I came away from my experience with AHS theater believing that I could do just about anything I put my mind to. It's hard to imagine a stronger tribute to an educator than that." Ames alum Stephen Pierce said, quote, "Mr. Hansen instilled something in me that has given my life purpose far beyond what I could ever have imagined when sitting in a classroom at Ames High, responding to the enlightened guidance of a man named Mr. Hansen. The experiences he provided were monumental in preparing us to become thinking, caring, and courageous contributors to our society," end quote. Mr. Hansen's work was revered by ISU Theater's faculty and recognized by the renowned Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. An online petition also attests to what a positive force he was. Wayne Hansen had an unrivaled dedication and commitment to Ames High School and its students, and influenced a multitude of lives over 40 years. Someone that special deserves the dedication of naming the new Ames High School facility the Wayne A. Hansen Auditorium. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Victoria. Tom Emerson.
This makes me number 61. In the 19 board meetings you had mid-April, Hank advocates have spoken to you from this microphone, well, it was 58 times until tonight, so 61. Thank you for your patience. But I'd like, excuse me, would you roll your voice goes gravelly or worse? I'd like to begin by reading 2 statements from Ed Hendrickson, who ran the Ames High Alumni Association newsletter for 20 years. During these 2 decades, I have received and answered thousands of emails from alumni. I have never witnessed as much passion for an Ames High teacher as I have regarding Hank Hansen. And I've read a lot of these letters, and I'm surprised how enthusiastic people are. Anyway, I decided to focus my time on 9 alums who talked about how Hank Hansen affected their lives after they left high school. Reverend Steve Buckley. He taught us to be good leaders, good citizens, and good people. Susan Finnemore. He gave us the tools to sail confidently into the next phase of our lives. Dr. Krista Okiishi. I left Ames High with the tools and confidence that I would be able to find a place in the larger theater world. These lessons were hardly exclusive to theater. Indeed, they are part of the bedrock of my life. Loretta Jordanis. Hank Hansen made us realize that we are not gifted at everything, but have immense special individual talents that contribute to the whole community and world. Andrew Haviland, who spent 30 years in the diplomatic service. Hank had a lasting influence on my life. The many lessons and skills I learned from him stuck with me and had a significant impact throughout my professional career. He helped me to leave my comfort zone, seek new opportunities, and constantly learn. Catherine Woodman. The theater department was a safe place for all the high school's weirdos to learn, laugh, and take risks. That sense of community is one I have striven to recreate my whole life. Nancy Weiss. Hank helped you see the cliques didn't matter and that what others thought of you didn't matter. What mattered was how you saw yourself and the role you could play in the lives of others. Rick Paulson. I know I'm not done learning yet, and that too is a debt I owe Hank Hansen, or Wayne Hansen, actually, in this case, for he was remarkable in his continued zest for learning and exploration. Dr. Paul Volcker. I learned the value of humanism from Hank Hansen. What could be more important to a human being? I'm out of time. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Jenya Coffee.
Evening. My name is Jenya Coffee. I live at 2205 Prairie View East. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Ames Youth and Schools Action Team, also known as ASAT. ASAT is a nonpartisan group of concerned citizens whose intention it is to shine light on racial and ethnic disparities that exist throughout the Ames Community School District. Our goal is to improve educational opportunities for children of color and other marginalized groups. Since 2017, ASAT has been asking the same two questions. Number one, how can the community monitor the current state of disaggregated achievement data by building in math, science, and reading? And number two, what is the district's plan to reduce these disparities? We have seen the middle school and high school data snapshots that are referenced in the Teaching and Learning Committee minutes on tonight's agenda, and that appear as an agenda item for this evening's work session. This document gives us at least some limited information comparing MAP scores from fall to winter of this year at the two secondary buildings. This is at least a step in the right direction for our first question. We would appreciate these data being easier to find and easier to interpret for the average parent or interested member of the community. Looking at these data, we can see that while the overall likely proficiency in reading for Black students is still well below that of white students, it has moved from 44% to 58%, and we celebrate that movement in the right direction. We also see, however, that where math is concerned, it has dropped from a very low 40 to an even lower 37%. At the high school, there were only very small gains for Black students in both math and reading proficiency levels. Both remain below 50%. The Teaching and Learning Committee has met to discuss the middle school data snapshot. The minutes say only that the district is looking at student data to provide more targeted interventions. This is the same vague wording that has been used to discuss what the district is doing for years and years now. Certainly 6 years have been enough time to make and carry out several plans and provide data as to their effectiveness. What is the current plan? We hope that in tonight's work session, the discussion moves beyond simply discussing the comparisons in data from Q1 to Q2. We ask that the district articulate a plan to address these disparities. We return to the two questions we have been asking since 2017. Number one, how can the community monitor the current state of disaggregated achievement data by building in math, science, and reading? And number two, what is the district's plan to reduce these disparities? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jenya. Monique Finken?
Really tall. Monique Bacon, 4810 Dover Drive. I'm speaking tonight as an individual. Sometimes when people are talking, they use the same word, but it means different things to each of them. So they miscommunicate because they aren't actually talking about the same thing. I've started to wonder if this is what is happening between the district and the community when the community asks the district to articulate its plan to address our academic disparities, and the district responds with what seems to be strategies, but not an actual plan. For example, ASAT and other people in the community have asked the district to share its plan to address the disparities, and the district has responded with, we're going to focus on professional development, or we're going to focus on the Danielson framework, or we're going to focus on attendance. However, none of these things is a plan. They are better described as strategies to address components of a plan, but they themselves are not actual plans. So I looked up the definition of the word plan. A plan is a detailed proposal for doing or achieving something. Or a plan is a course of action to achieve a desired goal. Or my favorite, a plan is a detailed method for obtaining an objective. Each of these definitions contains the same two critical pieces, a series of ordered steps and a specific outcome. Plans use words like first, second, third, then, next, and finally. And plans communicate the incremental steps that will be taken and in what order to reach the end goal. Think of it this way. If you decided that you were going to build your own house without any previous house building experience, and someone asks you, hey, what's your plan? You wouldn't just say, I'm going to do some professional development. Certainly, doing some professional development is a needed strategy that would help you build your own house, but clearly that's not a plan likely to lead to success if that's all you're going to do. At some point, you'll have to get permits, buy materials, etc. So when the community asks the district for its plan to address the educational disparities, please know that we are not asking for strategies, but rather we're asking for specific series of ordered steps the district is going to use to address the disparities. Since the district and board are about to once again discuss the district's educational data in a work session, I respectfully ask you to please begin the process of articulating a plan, a real, complete, meaningful plan about how you are going to address these disparities. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. And we do not have anyone signed up to speak virtually this evening. So with that, I will close our public forum and we'll move on to our consent items, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaugh. Superintendent Lawson, gifts to the district.
Yes, thank you. The superintendent's office received the completed form for and recommends acceptance of the following gifts. Non-perishable items in the value of $600 from Delta Kappa Gamma for the benefit of the Hope Pantry, $85 cash, excuse me, and $400 in non-perishable items from Home Allies, Inc. for the benefit of the Hope Pantry. Non-perishable items in the amount of $350 for Thriving Action Team for the benefit of the Hope Pantry, and $250 cash from Northminster Presbyterian Church for the benefit of the Hope Pantry. And those are all of the gifts to the district for this evening.
Thank you. It was moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum to accept the consent items. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Moving on to our action items, we will begin with our Go Bond prepayment. And we'll get our agenda back up on the screen here shortly.
I move the resolution of authorizing the redemption of general obligation school bond series 2019 dated June 5th, 2019, approving a third amendment to escrow agent agreement and levying a tax for fiscal year 2024 for the redemption of general obligation school bond series 2019 dated June 5, 2019.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Linkaitis. Discussion? Okay, and this will be a roll call vote.
Sorry, give me a second. Director Linkaitis,
Aye.
Director Becker,
Aye.
Director Veerbaum,
Aye.
Director Shields Cook. Aye. Director Winfrey. I'm sorry, Director Franson,
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
Okay, passes 6-0. Thank you. New Ames High School construction project change orders.
I move the board approve the change orders for the new Ames High School construction project as presented. Second.
Moved by Veerbaum, seconded by Becker. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And that will take us to our student representative, board, and staff items. We'll begin this evening with our items from our student representatives.
I just wanted to start off with like a good thing, just kind of repping the high school a little bit. The high school is going to be hosting a culture fair on April 8th. I just wanted to let that be known because I know we talk a lot about inclusivity and just different cultures, ethnicities. So that's something the high school is doing for that. Alongside also on theme of just like standardized testing, MAP testing, ISASPs. I know a lot of the stuff that we talk about is not getting enough student participation in those tests and surveys and stuff like that. And I think something that I see as a student, and I could say probably almost everyone in the school also sees, is just like the lack of incentive and motivation to complete those tests. Like, as you know, for MAP testing, we have to take them 3-4 times a year. And then we have ISAFs on top of that. And we've been doing that since elementary school all the way till the end of high school. And obviously we as high school students probably don't need an incentive to do tests and stuff like that, but it definitely helps when we want that motivation of having to do repetitive long tests over and over again every year. So I think that'd be a nice thing to be able to implement in the high school, of just getting some sort of incentive for students for being able to finish these tests or pass, if that's what the goal is for the school and the board as well. If you want to.
I don't really have anything else to add with that. He summed it up pretty good.
All right, well, thank you both. Items from the board. I'll start with requests from staff. And so I did note the answer to the question of whether it will be auditorium or performing arts center. And then just making sure we follow up with the policy on that one. Any other items for staff that I missed? Okay, other items from the board. And I just wanted to take a moment to speak to our LGBTQ plus community, students, staff, parents, and families, and just tell you that I know this has been a really difficult couple of weeks. There has been a lot of really disappointing and disheartening things that are coming down at the state level that affect our LGBTQ plus students, staff, and communities. And I just want to say that I see you. And I recognize that, and we will continue to do everything we can to support our students, staff, and families.
And I would say thank you to Dr. Lawson and your staff for reaching out to all of us to put out the statement of support. I have had very positive feedback on it. So thank you for taking the initiative on that.
I think I would kind of riff off that a little bit and say I've been thinking about whether or not to say something about that too. But one thing I'd come around to is, we're here for the students, and we have heard from students that not only are in that community, but also are friends with people in that community, or just even taking into account last year, marginalized students that have been shunned and really not looked at. And the thing I wanted to kind of say to the students, for all those students that watch the board meetings, maybe like one, is to remember the state legislature does not represent the Ames community. The Ames community does care about you, does love you, does fully support you. And the people you're walking around in the Ames community with, more than likely are fully supportive of you. And I know that's hard to remember sometimes, but please remember that, because the Ames community does want to support students in all ways, LGBTQIA students, students of color, students of all sorts of identities. The state legislature seems to have a kind of a war on acceptance of people that don't share their identity, but that's not Ames. That's not who we are. So not only will the board keep supporting you, but the community will as well. And I think to reiterate something a previous board member said, also remember you have options in your future, right? Like if you are currently a high school student and feeling scared or unsafe because of some of these things, you might not have to be in Iowa in the future. You can go other places, and those places are completely supportive of you. So keep that in mind as you're going through your life here in Ames. We're supportive of you, and we're supportive of helping you to find a place that you're accepted. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, items from the superintendent.
I don't have any items. I did just want to say thank you to the board for your responses when I sent out that statement of support. Thank you for your expeditious responses. Greatly appreciated.
All right, that takes us to our board planning calendar. Our next meeting will be April 10th. And that one is at 5:30 p.m. with the work session. Any comments or questions on the board planning calendar? Okay, so we will take a 3-minute break and we'll reconvene for our work session, and we will be ending our live broadcast at this time.